can we film now? No.
Okay.
All right. Hi, class. Welcome to Logic. This is the first class after the midterms. And I'll give you the grades and everything a little bit later. But today we're going to be looking at Chapter 4. And so the next 3 chapters is going to be the remaining of the semester. It's 4, 5, and 6. If we could get to Chapter 7, that's fine. But if not, we will just leave it at 6. So from here on out, we're going to be looking at how to properly formulate deductive arguments. And so before, we were looking at fallacies. And I think fallacies are extremely fun. That's why I kind of begin with them, because a lot of times you could recognize in yourself the first time you research, you'd be like, wow, I do all those fallacies.
I do that a lot.
Yes, yeah. And so it's kind of good just to get in the mindset of what a fallacy is. But now we're going to look at actual properly structured arguments. Now, before we start, can you introduce the wine real quick?
Okay, yes. So Rodney Strong, Sonoma Coast, 2015.
Oh, beautiful.
We both needed it. So I splurged a tiny bit.
Yes.
All right.
Awesome. All right, so to begin, a categorical proposition is when you have a proposition where you're relating 2 categories and they're denoted by the subject and predicate terms. Cheers. Cheers. That's lovely. I always like how there's a little drip of wine.
I know.
After pouring. All right. So it's basically when you have a proposition that you're relating 2 categories to each other, and they're denoted by the subject and predicate term. And so, a lot of the students right now have to probably remember back in grade school or middle school when they're learning about grammar. But it's just going to be very important, because normally the teacher, when you're in elementary school, the teacher is not going to be discussing to you about reality, metaphysics.
Hopefully not.
Yeah, they're ontological.
That might break a child.
Right, yeah. Or epistemology. And so basically what they've constantly been telling you is that a noun is a person, place, thing, or idea. Mm-hmm. Even though I think now they kind of erased the idea. Now they just say person, place, or thing. And idea, I guess it's in thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is kind of weird. Because
Agreed.
To say Pythagorean theorem is a thing, it's kind of weird. So it's an idea. And so I don't really see how it's a
pattern.
Thing. Yes, but to contain thinghood, I think you need some kind of substance.
Yeah, agreed.
But anyways, and so in this class, I always separate thing and idea, and just get used to it because that's more correct. And so you have a noun, it's a person, place, thing, or idea. And so the subject term is always denoted by the noun, right? Yeah. A subject term cannot be a verb, it cannot be an action, or whatever. And the predicate term if you look at the entire predication, the predication is always going to contain a noun, even though it also contains the verb, right? And I think that's what's sometimes a bit difficult when we're doing categorical propositions, because the 2 categories is always going to be denoted by a noun, but one is in a predicate, one is in a predication, the other one's in a subject term. And so what do I mean by that? And so, for example, if you were to say like all dogs are mammals. Yeah. Right, and so dog is the noun, is a subject, and mammals will be predicating what kind of subject that is, and so the mammalness of the dog is predicated in that sentence. And so there's 4 types of categorical propositions that can be made. There's no other types rather than these 4. Yeah. And so the first one is called an A proposition, and that's when you proclaim all SRP. And so if you say all subject are the predicate, so all dogs are mammals, you're saying that the entirety of the subject is inside of the category of mammals, the subject that is dog. And so all SRP. The other one is no SRP. And so you're saying that nothing of the S is inside P. So if you say no dogs are cats, you're saying that nothing in the entire category of cats is inside dogs. And in this one, we're going to see vice versa, and we're going to see why that's important. The other one is some SRP. And so that's simply saying that some of the subjects in the predicate. So if you say some cats are hairy, that's simply saying that at least one cat is hairy. Yeah. And then the last one is some S are not P, and that's saying that if you say some cats are not hairy, then you're saying that there's at least one cat that is not hairy. That's all that those things refer to. All right. So in these type of propositions, you have what is known as a quantifier, the subject term, the copula, and the predicate term. And so when you have a proper categorical proposition, it's always going to contain these things. So if you say all dogs are mammals, you have the quantifier, which is all, you have the subject term, which is dogs, and you have the copula, which is are, and then you have the predicate term, which is mammals. And so these four qualities are required for a categorical proposition. You cannot have a categorical proposition without those qualities. So, all right, I think that's pretty easy, right? That's self-explanatory, I hope so. I don't want to bombard too much on that because I think there's a little more importance in the next part of 4.2.
Yeah.
All right, so in this part of the chapter, we'll be looking at what is known as the quality, quantity, and distribution. And these principles within these propositions are basically going to be, it has to be understood completely in order for us to get into categorical syllogisms, because many of the principles of its validity is going to be hinged on, especially on distribution and on its quantity and its quality. And so,
distribution meaning where it is, or what does
no,
that
we
mean?
will get to that.
Okay.
This is the part that confuses most of the students for the first time anyways. So let's do some of the easier stuff first. And so let's say you have quantity. So if you have the proposition all SRP,
Yeah.
the quantity of that is going to be understood as universal, because you're saying that
Any number of existing cats.
Yeah, it says that every single cat. So if you say all cats are mammals or all cats are felines, you're saying that the entirety of the subject cat, of the category cat, is inside the predicate term of felines. And so it's a universal proposition. It requires...
It's not dependent on how many cats there are.
Yeah, it is not.
Yeah.
Just in principle, it's universal. And the same thing is with no SRP. So when you have no SRP, that's also a universal proposition. Because you're saying that the entirety of the category S is not inside the entire category of P. And then you have the other two, some SRP and some S are not P. And so with this I proposition, some SRP, you're saying that only at least one of the subject is inside the predicate. And so this is not a universal proposition. This is understood as a particular proposition. Because it's only talking about one particular thing. That's also true about the O proposition, which is some S or not P. And so I'm always going to relate it to this way because it's A, E, I, and O. So A proposition, all SRP, E proposition, no SRP, I proposition, some SRP, and O proposition, some S or not P. All right, and so quantity is, I think, is a little easier to understand. Now, the next one is quality. Here it's going to get a little more complicated, and then distribution is going to be the most complicated one.
Sure.
So the quality of the proposition is trying to determine what kind of value the proposition is having. And so when you have all SRP, this is understood as an affirmative value, because you're saying a truth claim affirmatively about the subject. And so if you say all dogs are mammals, you're saying affirmatively a truth claim about the existence of dogs, which is that has the quality of mammalia, right? So at least that is in that category. And then when you have an E proposition, no SRP, that is understood as a negative quality because you don't know anything affirmative. All you're saying is that no dogs are cats. And so with that,
you don't know what dogs are,
right,
but you know that they are not cats.
Yes, you know that they are not cats. And I think this many times confuses many young students because, especially if they're very avid YouTube watchers, there is this kind of weird theory going around within the YouTube community, especially the YouTube atheists, who try to say that they're somehow containing a non-proposition or a non-position when they claim to be atheists. They're saying that it is simply the lack of belief in God, right?
Well,
and
it's
so
actually the belief that there is no God.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
But even when you are making a negative claim, it still has truth value. Its truth value is simply via negativa. It isn't as if it is absent value because you're not affirming something. You could simply deny something, but by denying something, you're still containing some kind of truth value. It's simply a negative truth value, and that's what's really important when you look at these categorical propositions. All right, and then the same thing goes with I and O propositions. So some SRP is affirmative, and some S or not P is negative. And so now we have, at least we understand the quantity and the quality. It's either going to be affirmative or negative, and it's also going to be either universal or particular.
Yeah.
And that's how it's broken up. So the last one is distribution. Okay, so distribution, now I might reword this, especially if students are taking notes so they can kind of know what it means.
Yeah.
So distribution is when you look at the proposition, asking yourself, what is univocally known in the proposition in reference to its quality and its quantity in an affirmative sense? And so what is univocally known affirmatively, given its quantity and its quality, within the sphere of the proposition. So not what is known outside of the proposition. So if I simply say all dogs are mammals, I'm not going to say I know everything that there is to know about dogs.
Yeah.
We're referring to its subject and its predicate, what is known here. And so when you say, for example, all dogs are mammals, the only thing that is known universally in that proposition is the subject term. Because the predicate term, I don't know what category that's in.
Yeah.
So if I say all dogs are mammals, I know everything about dogs in reference to its mammalia, but I don't know what mammals is in.
So does distribution mean like
what is known?
Scope of knowledge?
Yes.
Distribution could mean scope.
Scope,
Same kind of.
Yes, and it has to be a universal.
That sense of the word.
A universal scope. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's what is univocally known, and so in that so in an A proposition, it's always only going to be the subject term that is known. Only the subject term is distributed in any A proposition. And this is going to be important because once we have the argumentation, you have to realize that you cannot further an argument if you have an A proposition while only proclaiming something about the subject in both cases. Both are A propositions because the predicate term is then never known.
Yeah.
And so since it's not known, you have to propose a proposition that says something that is known about the predicate term if given an A proposition. E proposition, no SRP, both are distributed.
Yeah.
Both are distributed because you know that the entire category of S is not inside the category of P and vice versa. And so this is why with an E proposition, the truth value remains the same if you swap it. And so for example, in A proposition, that cannot be the case. So if you say all dogs are mammals, is not the same as to say all mammals are dogs.
Yeah.
But to say no dogs are cats is the same as to say no cats are dogs.
Okay.
That since both terms are distributed universally, and then it is known at least that it is not the other. All right, the next one is some SRP, and so some SRP neither are distributed because you're saying at least one S, and so you know the subject can never be distributed with a particular proposition because it is not universal, and the predicate is not distributed for the same reason why it's not distributed in an A proposition because I don't know what the category of P is in.
Yeah.
And so with an E proposition, neither is distributed. And lastly, the O proposition, so if you say some S are not P, for some S are not P, it's only the predicate term that is distributed. Because you know at least one S is not inside the entire category of P. And so in an O proposition, only the predicate term is ever distributed. And and so this is something that I think for the students, it's always a bit difficult for them to comprehend it, right?
Yeah.
And when you look at the exercises, it's probably going to be a little bit easier.